Okay, Nima, thank you for agreeing to do the interview today.
Thank you, man.
It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So, can you explain what it was like to train with Grandmaster Chun Tim?
Sure. Training with him was like a movie, man. Because I first met him in Australia, in Sydney. So you meet him and he's the Grandmaster. There was a couple of thousand students grand students that he had. I was one of them, and you sort of meet him and he's the main dude. It's like meeting Bruce Lee and the Dalai Lama at the same time, So he was a big deal. So then, when I got a letter from my Sifu to come and train with him, it was a huge deal for me, And when we first came, we were actually training in his living room. So it was a very small sort of place. He had the dummy set up there, and we'd be training away. So we were training from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. And his wife would sort of come out at 8 o'clock, and she'll start cooking up the dinner, and then they'll bring the little mahjong table. They'll eat while we train away. So it was very intimate. It was really like being in a kung fu movie, Yes. And the training was quite different from what I expected. When I was training in Australia, before that I was doing weights, and then I was doing balancing and stuff like that. So it was everything was about fighting. The training was very hard. My main training partner that I came up, there was a grading system. So I came up all the grades with him. He's a 100-kilo Polish guy, real tough guy. And me and him were always partnered together. No one else wanted to partner with us because we would just go too hard, And even if it was just like a normal thing, like a drill, like, a pak sao and punch or something, maybe one of us will sort of turn it into something. And if we didn't have a bloody lip, it wasn't a good week of training. So it was like that. It was very hardcore. So from there, coming to Hong Kong, 2005, when I first arrived, that was around the time where Chun Tim was changing his teaching. So there's a video out there where he describes he had 3 different phases of teaching. In the last decade, I guess because he knew he was going to pass away, and he wasn't happy with what he had done as a teacher to pass on the, for lack of a better word, internal sort of aspect of the art.
Yes.
He decided to change his teaching more to focus on Siu Nim Tao. Right? So when I got there in 2005, the change was happening. So there was still a lot of chi sao, there was still a lot of striking. So I did lots of chi sao and punching and kicking with the seniors there, but it was 60% Siu Nim Tao, right? And it was, as I said, I was there 6 hours every day. So majority of the time, for about 3.5, 4 hours, I was practicing Siu Nim Tao. And he hadn't had students that had done that before. Not because they weren't serious sort of students. He had a lot of serious students, but because they have kids, they have work. So no one would come from open to close. Some of the maximum would be 4 hours, right? And in that video, he talks about, I started to teach this way thinking that I won't keep any students, but I realized there's a lot of people that are actually doing the practice. They're standing there and doing the sort of the Siu Nim Tao practice and stuff like that. And then I went back from 2005, I went back and saved up some cash, came back in 2006, and by then it was pretty much all Siu Nim Tao. So I was doing pretty much 6 hours a day of just standing and practicing Siu Nim Tao. And there was no such structure to it at that time. What it was like, there was around maximum in the class, maybe 10 people, and each given time. And we would just stand there and do whatever we wanted to do. We would just practice Siu Nim Tao, whatever. And he'll come around, his method of teaching was very much hands-on. So he'll come around and he will manipulate the joints to try to relax you and give you that feeling of what it should feel like in the joints, etc. And then I should add though that a few years before he died, I think it was about 2009, he announced that he's going to retire. And for us it was like a shock. We're like, fair enough, he's becoming 80 soon, but we're like, man, we moved all the way here, don't retire. That's what I was thinking. But it was a big announcement. He came in, it was like, I've decided, I think it was from his family that wanted him to have time off. So, and that was really great, because what he said is, I'm going to pass on every form in 6-month blocks. 6 months Siu Nim Tao, 6 months Cham Kyu, Bilji, all the way to the dummy and the weapons. Now, in the 60 plus years of him teaching, even when he was running Yip Man school, teaching for Yip Man, in that 60 plus years, he had never done that. So he's got students that has been with him for 40 years, and he didn't systematically teach them movement by movement, not just say, okay, this is how the shape of it, but to say, this is what you should think about, this is what this joint is doing, this is what that's, so he broke down everything, and we were very lucky that he allowed us to film it all. So then it became a bit more structured. We'd come in and he'll be like, okay, today we're going to look at this movement of the pole, and then everyone would get out the pole and we'll start practicing. So it was like that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Siu Nim Tao is the core the engine of everything else. So if you don't have if you can't utilize the Nim Tao, which I'll explain what that is, but let's say the very relaxed, open condition of the body, if you don't have that, and you go into Cham Kyu, sure, you can make it do the Cham Kyu, you can get very good at it, but you'll start to look at Cham Kyu in a different way because you haven't got the internal feeling of how to, basically you won't be able to find your center of gravity, your center of mass, so that you won't be able to utilize it. Why? Because when you try to feel your body, when it's tense, all you feel is that gross, dense feeling. When something is tense, you can't feel inside, you can't feel the joints inside, therefore you can't see your skeleton all as one unit. And therefore you can't find that. So I wouldn't say the majority. Look, in the first few years, yes, because he was just changing his teaching. Yes, it was mainly Siu Nim Tao, right? And I should add here that in a lot of videos you'll see people just standing. They're just standing in stance, you know. So I was one of those guys that stood there. Sometimes, some days I wouldn't even move much. So I'll be like this for 5 hours. It was agony, man. It was, so, you know, the legs, the back, whatever. And because I was 21 when I first came, so I was very young, and you know, I didn't want to disappoint him or seem weak. So, you know, it was so painful, but I didn't want to sit down, so I'd just go to the toilet and then put the toilet seat, put the thing down, the cover down, and I'd sit down for, you know, have a 1 minute rest and come out.
Just to rest the legs.
Just to rest the legs and the back, and you know, and it must have looked weird because by the end of the night I was going in every like 10 minutes. You know? Okay. But yeah, so that was the kind of training. But I should add that we started that, he never asked us just to stand. He never asked us just to do Siu Nim Tao, never. It's just what he was teaching, especially when he found out about the spine and stuff like that. We were like, okay, we've got to work on that. So I'll just do this. Then I was going to say foreigners, but I'm a foreigner, but people from Australia and stuff, others sort of grand students will come and they'll see all of us standing, and they assumed he asked us to stand. So then this whole thing got out there that Choi Chun just gets people to stand. No, that we started that, but he's as a teacher, like sometimes people will come in and they'll start boxing the sandbag, the hangbag. They're just boxing, or they will do some weird stuff, man. And he would just sort of look at them and he'll laugh or turn around, which means he would let you do whatever you wanted to do. Okay. Even if from day one, if you picked up the pole, he'd be okay with that. He'll probably make fun of you and show that you can't do it, but he'll let you do it. He was very open in that way, very Chinese in that way, you know. Yes. So yeah, but definitely he didn't say. So what's his main focus was, no matter what form you're doing, no matter what you're doing, to feel inside, to be able to mindfully relax. When I say mindfully, that word just gets thrown around a lot, but mindfully relax means, like for example, if I just relax like this, someone goes, okay, you're too tense. If I'm like that, relax, and I go like this. Now the only joints that are not decompressed, this one, because they're hanging, there's no pressure. But my shoulder blade, my spine, even the hip joints, they're all compressed. You know, this is like relaxing on a couch type thing. This is not the relaxation we talk about. When we talk about mindful relaxation, which I'll do all these demonstrations later so you can tangibly feel it, there's a decompression in the joints, actual tangible, where you will be able to feel it in my body. Not that I'm like, okay, that's it. You'll be able to feel that joints are decompressing, right? It's something different to just going like that. So the idea was, no matter what you guys do whatever, but do it in as effortless as possible, and try to initiate all the movements with the mind, which we can call Nim Tao. Yes. So he did not say, just do this, just that. He said at the end, one sort of point to highlight here is one day he was going down, because he lived after 6 years or 4 or 5 years, we moved up to the 10th floor. So we didn't train in his house anymore, in his living room, but we were in the same building. So at dinner time, he'll just go down an elevator, have dinner, and come back up. One time as it was going down, his son told me this. He said he went down with his son, and he was sort of thinking out loud, you know, and he's like, why is everyone just standing? Why aren't they doing anything else? So, you know, so he never asked people to stand, you know. Yeah, do TSAT, do sparring, do all of that kind of stuff. It was big on all those. But it's the method. As you're doing it, every action or every act that you're doing, every performance should have the internal engine. Everything is a test for that. Everything is a gauge for that. As I touch this, you know, is this happening? Rather than going, how can I hit hard? How can I do this technique? Do everything, but with the keep your mind's eye inside here. You know, everything is a challenge or a test for that state.
Yes.
I think a few factors. I think one thing is that his nature, the reason he got into Wing Chun. So he was, we can say, the third student. Leung Sheung Lok Yu started a couple of months before him, right? But he was working as a secretary at the workers' union, restaurant workers' union, where Yip Man started to teach in Hong Kong when he first came, right? So he was sitting there behind the desk and he was just watching. And he said he's written this in his book. He said he's intrigued by the name Siu Nim Tao. Why a kung fu you would call it little, it's got to do with the mind. Why not give it a cool name, a fighting name, right? And he kept seeing Yip Man was like, yay, hi, and Leung Sheung was like that. He kept seeing Yip Man sort of throwing Leung Sheung out and saying, and they're like, how are you doing this? It's like, no need to use muscular force, use your mind, and he was like, wow, he was very fascinated by this. Prior to this, his father forced him in his mid-teens in Guangzhou to train. He trained with a very famous Tai Chi teacher, yes, probably the most famous at the time in Guangzhou district. And he said he didn't like it. He didn't like the training, and it just wasn't for him. And he was sort of, forced by his dad to do it because he was getting sick. He was a very weak kid. He did that for less than a couple of years, and he came to Hong Kong. But he was very intrigued by what Yip Man was talking about the name and all that kind of stuff, right? So then Leung Sheung asked him, look, you're always here. Why don't you just start practicing? He's like, yeah, all right, Whereas other people were like Leung Sheung heard about Yip Man because Yip Man kept walking around apparently doing Hun's house, and people realized he was a Kung Fu master. Anyway, Leung Sheung heard about it, and he came and not challenged him, but sort of challenged him. Said, okay, you show me. That's how Kung Fu was back in the day, right? Yes. I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure Wong Shong Long was a similar sort of scenario where they would test the Sifu, right? So their thinking was to come in, it's about fighting, whereas Choi Shun Tim wasn't like that, right? And then when he started, he was living with Yip Man for 5 years, right? He said their room was like probably like this, where he said big enough to lay down 2 very small single mattresses. So it was very tiny, but they had a rooftop. So he would go up on the rooftop and he would just practice. And he said for hours and hours, very slow. He said the neighbors would make fun of him because they'll call him the crazy guy, because he'd come up and let's say he'd be doing a town sao and I said, what were you thinking about? He said, I would just stand there and I'll think, how can I, because he kept asking Yip Man, what does this mean, Siu Nim Tao? Yip Man said, just practice and use the mind. He would use the word lop nim, just use the mind, just use intention. So he's like, okay, how do I not use any muscular effort and just use the mind? So he'd be there for, I don't know if hours. I asked him how long. He said, I don't know how long. There was no concept of time, but maybe he would stand there for half an hour, just from going from here to here. So it looked static to other people. That's how slow he was moving, right? And other people didn't do that. When he started to teach in the main area, so you can ask Derek Fong. He's the sort of the eldest now out of that era, before Bruce Lee and that started. You can ask, who's the other guy? The William Chung? William Chung. Yes. So they both have said in videos that Choi Shun Tim was their teacher. He's the one that taught them Siu Nim Tao. So in that same video, Derek Fong talks about they would have a sort of a competition of who can do Siu Nim Tao the slowest, the standard. But the classes were only like an hour and a half. So they'll come to class. There were students then. There were school students. They'll come there, then they got to go to school. Whereas Choi Shun Tim was just doing that hours and hours and hours, right? And then he said, he said other people didn't practice some of the stuff that he practiced, some of the fundamental stuff for the forms. For example, Yip Man told him to stand on one leg, do one leg Siu Nim Tao practice. So he said he'd stand there, with the ankle above the waist and practice Siu Nim Tao. He'll hold this for 15 minutes and he'll just slowly do Siu Nim Tao. And he said other people just didn't do that. There was for the dummy, we have the low horse stance, which, you go like this and you practice this exercise before. He said no one did that. And the most surprising one was the pivoting in Cham Kyu. He'd stand there, he said when he started Cham Kyu, for 2 hours, a few hours every day, he would just do this. To try to, very slowly, very mindful, take that Siu Nim Tao state into that, to try to find his center of gravity. But he said others, and you can, look, it's here I should really highlight that I'm not saying Choi Shun Tim's method is better. We're just highlighting the difference. Like, someone like Wong Shong Long that doesn't do this way. You can see his Cham Kyu very much like this. He's obviously thinking about, like a boxer, how to get maximum, how to get fighting power from this movement, something like that, whereas he was doing something like this. Now, Wong Shong Long, someone that doesn't get enough recognition man, the guy was going out, he had over 100 fights, didn't lose. He fought a Russian national champion heavyweight boxer was taught to me by Chun Tin, and he dropped him in a few seconds, bare knuckle fighting. So the guys are like this big against a Russian guy, you know. So people that say, oh, Kung Fu doesn't work in a fight, you know, go look at Wong Chun Long as a thing. Chun Tin had a lot of fights as well, a couple of dozen fights, but he was, because of his nature, he was very passive. He wouldn't go out looking for it. It was Wong Chun Long was going out looking for it, you know. So I'm not saying it's better or worse, but I'm just saying that it's like planting two different trees, you know. You do get both trees, you do get both of them are Wing Chun, but one of them is a, I don't know, apple tree, the other one's an orange tree. They're completely different things. So Nim Tao comes from Siu Nim Tao. Siu Nim Tao means little, people say little idea, it's little thought. It's not thought, it's not thinking. You could say little idea or little intention, right? The reason I say it's not thinking, because you can't think your way into it. It's a present moment orientated thing. It's a state of being rather than a state of thinking, right? Now, Nim Tao, the way that Master Choi explained it and what I can feel, is when you activate this part of the brain, the back upper part of the brain, okay? When you minimize the front lobe activation, so this is where we think with, this is like when you say, okay, what's 12 times 300, you know, for a split second, or when you're playing video games or when you're on your phone, when we're thinking, we're using here. When we use this less and activate this, that's an Nim Tao. The way to be able to use this area, again, not to like try to feel this area, think your way into it, is through Tai Gong and Sing. Tai Gong is basically Tai Gong means internal contraction or internal lift from the anus area, okay? And Sing in Cantonese just means to rise up the spine, okay? Yes. Now these two are the most important, they're the on switch for this lineage. They're what activate Nim Tao. Chun Tin once said, I was asking about the importance of the rising energy in the spine. And he said, look, I don't know how to explain or what's happening there, but I do know that if I don't do it, I can't activate Nim Tao. He said, it's like if I pick up a remote, I press number 2, I know it's going to go on number 2, but I don't know how this process is happening. I just know it happens. It's like that, you know. And in the beginning, when he was finding, in the beginning about the rising up in the spine, he only found that out a few years into me being in Hong Kong. He realized that through manipulating people's spine, he's able to get them. Prior to that, it was all like, if you give me an arm, prior to that, we'll stand there and he would just sort of go, okay, relax locally, soften the joints, soften. So he would locally relax the joints and then he'll push on it to show you, to give you the feeling of, well, that's what it feels like, that's how much force you can take, or that's the feeling when it's relaxed. But when he found out about the spine, that he could manipulate, so he could get the same effect on the people that were relaxed enough, by touching their spine, he could get the same result of relaxation in other joints without touching the other joints. And then he was like, oh, that's it, you know, but he was doing that himself, but he didn't realize what he's doing until he sort of, I don't know how, but he figured it out. And that was, the whole thing sort of changed. That's when our improvement, the one that we're training with him, was just boom, 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 was going really, you know, it's all in the spine. I should add that he was a Chinese bone setter. He was a very good Chinese bone setter. So he was learning from one of Yip Man's friends. So that possibly had a lot to do with the way he was teaching. It was all that joint manipulation, tangible stuff. It's not like, oh, like this, relax, do you feel it? No, he would get in there and expand. I've got hundreds of hours of videos of, you know, of him doing it. So Tai Gong Seng is just basically mindfully decompressing and relaxing this area. Now, what does Nim Tao do? Okay, so let's say we activate here. What does that do? What it does is it enables you to be able to feel and control the musculoskeletal system, so the skeleton, the joints, in a remarkable way, in a very different way to a normal person activates it, right? According to Master Choi, you know, when a mother, we hear stories when her baby's underneath the car, they lift up the car. Yes. She's using Nim Tao. You know, she's not doing weights, she's not like doing kettlebells and all this kind of stuff, but she can lift the car when her baby's underneath it. Now you put $10 million there and say do it again, she probably can't tap. So she just taps into it spontaneously. What he said is, through the correct practice of Siu Nim Tao, we are learning how to tap into that at will and control that at will. Okay, so, and then there's different levels to Nim Tao, you know, so let's say he was 80% activation compared to someone that hasn't done that, let's say, you know, so there's different levels of it. And some people can utilize it just by standing. There's a girl that could stand like that, and she's like 40 kilos, man, and you pull up on her arm, really it's like trying to lift 40 kilos or more. And men, grown men, again, we're trying to lift, hold their arm here and pull up, and their shoulders is just sunk down, and she's just standing relaxed there like that. But then you ask her to do a tansa or chisa, she can't do it because she only practiced this, you know. So you can do it. So therefore, someone that can perform the performances that I do, does that mean I'll be able to do that at full scale fighting? Not necessarily, actually absolutely not. Unless I do the fighting or the sparring practice, I won't be able to do it in that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's Nim Tao. Now, Nim Lik is something that I think is a misunderstood term. Nim Lik is the flow of energy. It's the highest level of Siu Nim Tao. It's when you start to feel flow, energetic flow, for lack of a better word, in your body, right? Now, the energy, according to Master Choi, the energy, the Nim Lik is different to, he said this, he was adamant about this, he said it's very different to cultivation of the Dantian. So I guess in Tai Chi and Qigong that majority of people talk about Dantian.
Yes.
There is one lineage that one of my friends, Adrian, his name is, he's from Gold Coast. I just saw him a couple of months ago. He said, my Sifu actually says, he starts with the Dantian, but he said, it's all in the spine, you know. So that's the first one that I've heard say something similar. But Choi Tin said, it's not, doesn't follow the meridians it's very explosive. And I was like, yeah, but it has to start somewhere. Where is it? He said, it's everywhere. He said, okay, because I kept asking questions. He said, if I had to say initiate somewhere, it's at the tailbone and it rises up to the top of the head here through the spine. Okay, and one thing he said also, he said yogis that sit in full lotus, and he said they're using the same energy, the energy in the same way, but they utilize it to sit for days effortlessly. He said I don't think they'll be able to do anything with it apart from just sitting, but whereas we're using it for all of that kind of stuff. Now, Nim Lik they're just words, man. You know, some people are put off by the whole thing of internal Nim Lik, yes, mindfulness, or they're put off by it, right? It depends on the character, your belief system. But whether you believe it or not is not going to help you in any way to get it. It doesn't really matter if you believe it or not, you know? It's just people that do believe in it and put in the practice. Maybe if someone didn't believe in it and then goes, I'm going to prove them wrong by doing the practice diligently for a few years, they'll probably surprise themselves and they'll feel something, you know? But to me, it's not something metaphysical or mystical or anything like that, man. It's very tangible. So most people, when they say sink their chi and do stuff, they'll demonstrate it by throwing you out the window, that, you know, boom,
yes,
go and do, yeah. So doing that kind of stuff like that, explosive stuff like that. And you put out there, you say, so you see a video and someone goes, yeah, that's fake. And a lot of times it is, I'll say it openly, it is the students, not the students doing it on purpose, but they're holding themselves tense. If they're not tense, the teachers, if you're better than your student, your force will tense them up, right? Either you get hit by completely going limp and you get hit, or you try not to get hit, you try to push back and you bounce off. So it's like that. So that's why, can that be used in live sparring? My opinion is absolutely not, because if you could do that, you go to UFC and you become more famous than the US president. Okay, so it's got to be, it's in those situations and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's absolutely real, but the way Choi Tin, that's why the way Choi Tin performed it wasn't, and we got stuff like that he does like that, but I don't put those online yet. The way he performs it is, we'll hold his forearm like this. So I can't do this, but he'll hold the forearm like that, and then he'll go, okay, tense, and then he'll go, okay, that's tension. He'll go, okay, relax, like floppy relax, and then he'll do the thing again. I can't do this so you can feel it, but what it would feel like, it will expand slightly, and it'll start flowing, like, you know, if you're sucking water from a straw, and if you hold the straw lightly, you can feel the flow coming through the straw. Yes. It felt like that, like very, very tangible coming out, and then, you know, freak people out. He did it here in the seminar with like 30 people, one by one. They were like, what the hell is that? He would make it flow backwards. So not just this way, to prove that it's not blood flow or whatever, he'll make it flow backwards. And he was able to touch people, like put it into people to be able to relax them. So he would put it into people.
And what did Sifu explain what did he explain it as? What does he define the feeling of what you could feel moving?
Yeah, he said he doesn't know. He said he doesn't know. He said, I don't know what it is. He said, and I don't know why it has to come up the spine. You know, maybe because there's I don't know, the whole nervous system is there, right? So I don't know why, but he said, I don't know what it is. And in his DVD, he talks about it. He just says, yeah, the highest level is Nim Lik. You know, that's he gave that term. It's not Yip Man. He gave it that term because it's from Nim Tao, Nim Lik. But yeah, he said, I don't know what it is. He actually tried as well, you know, people probably going to make fun of this, but he actually tried as well because he really felt it coming out of his body, and he tried to move stuff with that without touching it. So he tried on I don't know if it was tissue or a cotton ball, something very light. And he said it diligently, and when he says diligently, it means hours a day. He tried, this was in his 60s or 70s, he tried to move it. He said for 6 months he tried, didn't do it. That's why when he asked, he was like, "No, that stuff's not real. You can't do no touch G. I don't believe in it," because he tried it and he couldn't do it. Therefore, he didn't believe in it.
Yes.
But yeah, so that is Nim Lik. It's very tangible. It's very real. But I should highlight that we don't do any breathing. We don't do any sort of focusing on any area and cultivation. Nothing like that. Once the body is relaxed enough, to deep enough, the relaxation is deep enough, and the Nim Tao is activated to a high level, that flow will naturally come. So that's why he would just say to me, I kept asking about Nim Lik, Nim Lik. He said, look, once you can fully relax your body, come back and we'll discuss. Now I understand what he meant, because the more you relax, naturally it's there. It's like something's blocked. By unblocking it, naturally it'll start flowing, and then you'll get access to be able to mobilize and utilize it.